So you guys know that most discussion of U.S. immigration is a complete and total fraud, right? That's what we discussed at some length in this podcast episode from last week, but it's now relevant enough that I felt like it was worth representing on the main YouTube channel with a bit of an introduction. The reason it is newly massively more salient is the big, beautiful bill that is currently working its way through Congress. By the time this is published, it may have already been passed, and it is an atrocity. And we're talking a lot about what it means for green energy subsidies. It destroys them. What it means for Medicaid. It scrapes it away. What it means for tax cuts. Massive gift to the rich. We've been talking a lot about all that, but it's kind of extraordinary that one of the most egregious, one of the most democracy-threatening aspects of this bill is not being discussed at all. And that aspect is immigration enforcement. It gives a ton of money to ICE and to a whole galaxy of other organizations that are under the Department of Homeland Security. It includes like $50 billion for Donald Trump's big, beautiful wall. It includes $50 billion to build out detention centers, essentially building up American concentration camps. We already had those. Those are prisons. This tremendously gooses the prison population of the United States, and it's reckoned to double the staff of ICE, an organization that is already serving as Donald Trump's sort of secret police, his sort of Gestapo, masked thugs going out throughout the country. We talk about this at length in this podcast episode, and it is newly horrifically relevant. There's this sort of switch. Essentially, the Democrats under Joe Biden decided to completely surrender on a lot of things. And one of the things they decided to completely surrender on is the completely mythological idea that building up this nationwide secret police that can go around masked, throwing people in vans. The Democrats had completely surrendered to this idea that this kind of border security, this approach to border security was appropriate or was somehow helpful in solving the immigration problems here in the United States. In this conversation, Rory and I talk about what the real problem is in immigration and immigration enforcement in the United States, and we talk at length about just what a nightmare these Department of Homeland Security programs are, and how very seriously, very legitimately, like they are probably the largest threat to U.S. democracy that we currently see. I hope you enjoy the conversation. If the United States was traumatized by 9/11 in ways that were bad for U.S. development going forward, its personification is the Department of Homeland Security.
Hello and welcome to the More Freedom Foundation podcast. I'm Rory, in charge of podcasting, and in charge of politics, as always, is Robert Morris. How are you this time?
I'm a little angry, Rory.
What's got you angry? Everything's going fine in America.
I've been hearing about this AI garbage for a while now. We did a couple episodes about it, 2 years back or something like that. But finally, this morning, for, maybe the first time, I decided to, instead of quickly scanning by those Google AI summaries, I decided to, read them, because we were talking about some...
Famously, the Google AI summaries are a bit janky.
It's trash. Even the better ones are trash. I think the idea that Google AI is pushing, that ChatGPT is pushing, Perplexity is pushing, is the idea that there is some kind of settled truth around all of these big topics. I was prompted by this. I was having a conversation on Israel-Palestine with a later middle-aged gentleman in my family. He thought he was settling the question by sending me some kind of AI-generated answer. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, the second line was incorrect. And then at that point, I sort of stopped reading it. So this morning, I was like, gee, so what is... the two we're recording today are, the question of immigration and jihadism in Mali are sort of the two episodes. And I sort of typed these in a bit, and it is horrifying. What these AI tools do is solidify consensus and provide the consensus conventional wisdom on something to you, more or less devoid of context. Sure, at the end of the Google thing, there's a little link so you can see maybe where they drew this from, but who's going to
But
look
it's
at that?
also the fact kind of, if you want the closest thing we have to that is genuinely Wikipedia, because you do actually have editors arguing with each other of what should be put. So I know it's not perfect, but I feel like if you want the most middle of the road, like consensus on something, you have Wikipedia.
And to be incredibly suspicious of Wikipedia. I think that's baked in.
But you should be of all media.
Of everything you read. Sort of the consensus view, more or less, is kind of the New York Times. And you get a sense, if you spend as much time looking at this stuff as we do, that what the New York Times biases are, what they're going to report on fairly honestly, and what they're not going to report on fairly honestly, i.e. Israel-Palestine. And you learn, when you read something, you always should know where it's coming from. What does the U.S. government want me to think? What does the CIA fact book want me to think? What does Fox News want me to think? What does New York Times want me to think? And you can apply that corrective. The illusion that like these Google AI results provide is that no, this is just the truth.
Have you ever had many like really obvious hallucinations with it?
I mean, it's the thing is, I think what often happens is that people go for very large, big picture questions. Like today, we're going to be talking a lot about immigration and what's the problem with U.S. immigration? And I'm going to give an answer to that. And that is my answer to that. And Google gives a very different answer to that. And I'm not going to say it's a hallucination or it's wrong, but what it is what the Democratic and Republican parties and like the institutional forces that have made this system as bad as it is have been pushing. And that's what Google serves up. So is it a hallucination? Actually, no, it's not that it's a hallucination. What Google is providing, what all these AI systems are providing, the hallucination aspect, sure, it happens, it's bad. There's all kinds of great examples. I mean, I've literally been using these technologies for 24 hours and I haven't got a list of my own examples. But what's terrible about it is that they are solidifying stupid consensus. And I think we hinted at this. I think we did a whole episode about how AI was going to consolidate this dumb pro-business fundamentalism, the Reagan consensus. And it's just really bleak on this immigration issue watching that happen. They say, oh, no, these questions are settled. These are the problems.
I did have a hallucination that I think may terrify you. I was once asking it something and it says, former President Trump. And I went, oh, you're wrong there. And it went, yeah, sure, because it's very like pleady. It sort of tries to make you out to be brilliant, like, oh, that's a wonderful idea you've come up with. So it was like, oh, you're absolutely right. Donald Trump, it was basically like, I am wrong about that. And I goes, okay, so Donald Trump's the president now. And it hallucinated an entire election where Joe Biden won for a second time.
Yeah, that's extraordinary.
But it kept talking about stuff. It was like it was in the past talking about future events. It got completely baffled. But there's also people have started like using it to win arguments in there, like a relationship and stuff. It's still quite baffling at this point.
I mean, it's absurd. It's an aggregator of what everybody thinks, and what everybody thinks is sometimes correct to some degree, but almost always is not, and almost always, if all we know is what everybody thinks and that becomes solidified, that's kind of a recipe for just not moving forward as a society any
But at
longer.
least we're all certain it's told us the truth about white genocide in South Africa.
Exactly.
Did you hear about that with Grok?
Yes, of how Elon Musk's AI on Twitter basically ran around trying to turn, for a couple days, was trying to turn every single conversation into a conversation about white genocide in South Africa.
I would also love, basically, it sort of shows one of the weird things about AI, because the machine learning is, it's sort of a black box. They don't exactly know the thinking of the AI. So apparently it was a rogue agent, someone low down, but obviously it was Musk had told them to do this. But it kept bringing this up and then went, I've been told to talk about this and I don't think it's true. And you're like, it's just so incredible. You spend so much on Twitter and then you spend so much on this AI and it's dunking on the thing you've told it to do.
Yeah, I mean, the whole AI conversation is malicious nonsense, but
That's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here today to talk about the Battle of Los Angeles.
Well, that's brilliant because I've been doing a lot of research and reading a lot of books about like it's basically they thought they were being attacked by Japan during World War II and they were firing ammunition to the sky, and then suddenly they realized, oh, we're not being attacked. So it should be good to break that down.
This is World War II you're talking about, right?
You know, it wasn't a real battle, but they called it the Battle of Los Angeles.
That is actually not what we're here to talk about, Rory.
Oh.
We're here to talk about the incredibly significant 1999 Rage Against the Machine album and its broader significance for really everything that we talk about.
Okay, that's brilliant.
It's certainly an ideological touch point for myself, and I thought we could do just an episode long, is it exegesis? Is that the term? You know, just track by track. We'll go through the Battle of Los Angeles and talk about it. Actually, that's not what we're doing either. So it turns out that our immigration dispute in the United States is coming down to some very, very straightforward, troubling, idiotic on many fronts street action in the city of Los Angeles. I believe the second largest city in the United States. Certainly debatable, the level of violence that is occurring there. But the president of the United States is trying very hard to escalate this as much as humanly possible so he can use it to win political brownie points on the topic of immigration.
Is it a sign that a country is really doing badly if it's having race-based riots?
Well, I don't think this is really a race-based riot.
Sorry, I thought there's currently some riots going on in Northern Ireland over immigration, and yeah, sadly. Yeah, it was on Al Jazeera and everything, mostly a town called Ballymena, which is good that I don't need to send my car there tomorrow to get it fixed.
Oh, is that where you get your car fixed?
Yes, in Ballymena, so that should be joyous.
Oh, you actually are going to have to go to the...
It should be fine. It's only a certain estate, but yeah, it's basically a pilgrim. It's quite terrifying.
Oh, that's kind of horrifying. So Irish folks...
Yeah, well, these people wouldn't see themselves as Irish, Rob. And also a man that has an Irish passport that's recently got out of prison, Tommy Ten Names, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson's recently out of prison and been doing his best to direct it, but... Thankfully, Elon Musk hasn't jumped on board yet.
I know nothing about this. So what is there was some kind of...
Basically, so it's very similar to what happened in England last year where, well, I think that was to do with that man that's clearly mentally unwell who murdered 3 children. And that caused a lot of rioting during the hottest parts of the year. This year, to Romanian... They're still technically children. It's an ongoing case. So that's why they haven't released the names. Were alleged to have done a sexual assault, and then that was enough to get the Twitter masses mobilized, and they've been kind of burning out anyone that's seen as an immigrant.
Well, that's deeply disturbing.
Oh yeah, it's horrendous. And then I think, is it Lisburn burnt down their own leisure center, thinking that immigrants were being kept there when there was nobody in it, thankfully.
Well, you know, it's a good reminder, Rory, that as racist as I think the United States is, Europe is past masters. You know, really, you know, we learned from the best, I guess. Specific issue of what immigrants are and are not doing is a really, you know, centering that, the idea of immigrant criminality, what have you, is a classic part of the right-wing playbook. People are unhappy, things aren't going as well as possible, so the wealthy people in charge of the country point, oh, no, don't look at us, look at these guys.
They're illegal immigrants.
They're these newcomers, they're the real problem. This is a tale as old as time, and one that is accelerating in the United States because of the way that it has given birth to a number of really unfortunate forces in U.S. politics that are creating, well, they're creating the problem we're seeing in Los Angeles right now with street action between protesters and the LAPD, and now apparently a variety of federal security services and the National Guard and potentially the U.S. Marines, which is all very disturbing. So I think I want to, you know, as we tend to do, I want to sort of back all the way up and talk about what the issue is here. One great distinction between the United States and, say, Ireland or Portugal or these other issues is that we are, in fact, the proverbial nation of immigrants. We have endless space in the United States, both physically and, I believe, economic space.
One thing that I always think of, sorry, is I don't know if you've heard of California City. Basically, they have all the roads and everything planned out, but there aren't any roads there yet. It's basically like a computer game nearly. And as the town needs to get bigger, they can just build it as they go. So it's already planned, which is something you'd never see in a place like Ireland because it's like everything's claimed and already built. So yeah, America does have so much land it can just go, let's make a new town, let's make a new city.
And we really do have sort of endless economic space. And for centuries, there was essentially no restriction on immigration to the United States. Up until the 1920s, there was basically nothing. There were fairly straightforward, infinite power for the sort of early days versions of customs and border protection. The guys at the ports could say, oh, you've got tuberculosis, you're mentally incapacitated, you're getting back on the boat, you're going home. That existed, but there was no, as there is today, decades-long torturous legal process around, maybe if you can afford an attorney, if you do this, if you do that, if you, present no problems for a full decade, then maybe we'll give you a green card. Like that, none of that existed. It was basically you show up, you look like you can work, you're in.
Well, I think famously a lot of Irish ended up in the Confederate Army purely because they got off the boat and it goes, great, we have a job for you. You're now in the Confederate Army. So
I think that's the Union Army.
No, I think both did it.
Well, the one of the reasons the Confederacy lost worry is that there were not a ton of migrants streaming through the South, whereas New York, Boston, Philadelphia were huge entrepôts. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm sure there probably were examples.
Oh, no, both definitely did it. But yeah, probably the North was better at it.
The classic ideal of Irish guys getting off the boat and getting shoveled directly into the Union Army is sort of the more prevalent story in American history, but I don't doubt that there were Confederates as well. Of course, but so it was quite straightforward. I think there was maybe like a year or two or something along those lines until you could like go back down to the office and get your actual like U.S. passport or citizenship or something like that. But it was not a difficult process. There were no barriers put up, and that, frankly, is what America is, to my mind. That is the best thing about the United States and is the source of our power. This is the reason we were able to outdistance all the little petty European empires. This is why we were able to outdistance and essentially buy the British Empire that ran the world in the 1800s. This is why we beat the Soviets, and if we can keep that immigration engine going, this is why we will beat the Chinese.
Well, because I've heard an argument basically saying some people are, the Chinese decline is either bad or very bad. And in 20 to 50 years' time, America, with all its friends, will outnumber China. So yes, you're absolutely right in that regard.
Well, yeah, I think, frankly, if we were smart about it, not by the end of this century, but by the end of the next century, we could simply outnumber the Chinese in raw numbers. We did it with the Soviets.
Because I think the American mainland is roughly the size of China, but it doesn't have the same amount of a giant desert and stuff. And considering China does currently have over 1 billion people, it is fairly plausible.
Yeah, I mean, the United States is all coast.
Oh yeah, the lucky country.
There's a huge interior, but like there's all kinds of...
And all those navigable rivers.
Yeah, China's got sort of one very big coast. We've got at least 3. And then, of course, we've got the Great Lakes that that actually already have half-empty cities surrounding all of them that could easily be filled in.
That may be very populous now with climate change making them a better location to live.
Yeah, so I'm currently establishing my bona fides as like a pretty open borders guy.
So you're more on the spectrum of let most of them in.
Yes. However, what happened in the 1920s is the law of the land. I mean, what happened in the 1920s was Woodrow Wilson got us into World War I, a war that we obviously won. We're really the only winner of World War I. However, it was horrifically costly. I was sort of looking at this recently. It's something like 150,000 or 200,000. It's over 100,000 U.S. soldiers died either fighting in Europe or in sort of barracks of the Spanish flu or something like that in the space of like 18 months. Nowhere near that many soldiers has died in the full 20 years of the War on Terror. Iraq and Afghanistan and everything else tied up together. It's a fraction of that. And this happened in 18 months. Deeply traumatizing to the U.S. public and filled the U.S. public with rage. And as is a time-honored thing, the U.S. leaders said, "Oh, you're really angry. It's the immigrants' fault." And the early 1920s in the United States are just insane. Like we had the Palmer raids, which were straight up actually the closest analog to what Trump is doing with students in the United States who talk about the genocide in Palestine. The closest analog, basically just stripping people of citizenship, of residence rights.
Is this also, what was the Black Wall Street? Is this when this takes place?
I believe that is also 1920s, but Black Wall Street is just this. So that particular thing, popularized by HBO's series Watchmen recently, was certainly very egregious. There's a beautiful museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where you can go get depressed and learn about that. But that is just one of dozens of similar events that didn't kill as many people. But yeah, everyone who was weak was blamed. African Americans, Catholics, actually, Jews for sure. I think the Anti-Defamation League was founded because of a lynching of a Jewish man. No, this was actually before. Don't know. We did anti-Semitic lynchings before World War I. The early 1920s were just extraordinarily violent. The Ku Klux Klan had a huge resurgence. You can see actual film of a great KKK march on Washington in the 1920s. Horrific time. Deep, deep anger in the U.S. political system, and the folks in charge then decided to blame the immigrants. And that's how we got the 1923 or 4, I can't quite recall, limitation of immigration into the United States. And that was the first sort of breaking of the U.S. immigration engine. I think it's important to emphasize that engine was broken because of the way that to support, and this is something that the United States in its origins was incredibly good at, had all kinds of societal norms, economic norms, the sort of thing that were just geared towards accepting as many people as possible all the time. That was a very clear national goal from 1776 until the 1920s, with, of course, some exceptions, the Know-Nothing Party, et cetera, but most people actually in charge of the United States understood we wanted to get as many people in as possible. And that was broken in the 1920s. And for 40 years, we were still taking in tons and tons of people, but dramatically fewer people. And our economy began to change. Our economy began to be built around not having those levels of constant migration. And we do want to be a nation of laws. It is no longer legal for everybody to come here and move here immediately. And in an ideal world, like in the same ideal world where I believe there should be no police officers, there should be no this thing, I would believe there are no borders, but that is not the world in which we live.
Was the 1920s not sort of around the time when passports started to be introduced? Because I remember there was this idea of almost like there wouldn't be any restriction on anywhere around the world. I assume that would, some people talk about it in an idealistic fashion. Like, imagine we never did have borders in the way that prevent people from traveling.
There's something I knew the answer to that question once, Rory, but I don't currently. But it's true. And immigration restrictionists would say, it's like, okay, well, sure, you could have this La La Land, Rob, where, it took 3 months or, it took not 3 months, but it took 3 weeks in like the bottom of a ship to get to the United States, and it was difficult. And, modern technology means that, you do need some kind of border. And I can go back and forth. Like I can believe that. Like I think that in part because the United States has destroyed so many places. If everybody in justice would demand that we take everybody from countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, most of Central America, that U.S. foreign policy has destroyed in my lifetime. But it's not a just world, and we're not going to do that. So yes, we are a nation of immigrants. In an ideal world, we would have an economy structured in such a way as to allow everybody in vacuum up as many as people as possible, as our founding fathers and our forefathers expected. But we can't do that anymore because a bunch of crappy leaders in the 1920s decided to make us a weaker country. And that's just what we deal with. So if we're going to have an immigration system, we need to have one that is ruled by laws. And for at least 40 years now, we have had a lot of people who have worked in our system to make sure that we don't have a system of laws. This is not the biggest victims of this process, the migrants themselves. This is not like the flaming leftists who are trying to keep our borders open and or Joe Biden or No, this is donors to the Republican and Democratic parties, just rich folks with big factories where they don't want any of their workers to have rights.
Okay. Because I'm always reminded of the way Switzerland does it is it's almost like the immigrant has a lot, say you're a legal immigrant, you have a lot of rights, and it's up to the company to make sure you're legal. So I think you can basically tout on your employer, get them in trouble, and then you might get citizenship out of it. So it means they spend a lot of effort making sure that everyone's legitimate.
And since I started being aware of this issue in the 90s, it has been transparently obvious that that is the way to do it. If there is illegal employment in your economy, if there is a black market employment in your economy, the appropriate way to deal with that is to go after the employers, because they are the ones with power. They are the ones with money. They are the ones creating the possibility.
How bad is this? Because I'm reminded of the way you became a citizen in ancient Rome. So you'd be a slave for roughly 10 years, and then you would be granted your freedom and you become a citizen. It almost feels like there's something like this where you're like a naturalized citizen. You kind of work under the radar. You're paid below average wage. You're heavily exploited. And if you're there long enough, it's like, good luck. You can now be a normal citizen and pay more taxes.
I'm not entirely, I think that may have been the case for some Romans. There were also a lot of Roman slaves who died.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying the
horrific mining
idealized version.
The idealized version. Nobody's planning that. Nobody's looking at it in that way. And any attempt to set that up, there's been, since the Obama administration, there's been a consciousness that like a lot of people were brought here as children and don't speak whatever language is supposed to be, and that
or their parents are from.
I haven't gone through the minutia of the definitions of dreamers or DACA or whatnot, but this is sort of the general population, that a series of policies in the Obama administration, which is now coming up on at least a decade ago and probably longer, those folks were meant to be introduced to a process that would hopefully get them citizenship. And now in the second Trump administration, that list of folks who sort of came forward and were like, how can we resolve the situation? I think are just being used as a target list for Trump's. I'm not sure if they've been used, if those lists have been used yet, but that's something that Trump definitely wants to do, or people in his administration definitely want to do. So the point is, the reason our immigration system is so screwed up is because, I hesitate to use such a, employers want to have a better version of what employers had throughout U.S. history. So basically they want slaves again. So essentially what used to happen when we had a huge influx of immigrants all the time is you get a bunch of folks who don't know the ins and outs of the economy, don't know the language, are willing to work probably for a lot cheaper, but they're here legally. So over time, they can learn the language. They can band together and form a union. They can advance economically, become employers themselves. Like that's the virtuous cycle. What we've got now is a situation where people come here, and in some ways, yes, it's worse than the Roman Empire. That like ability, that at least that possibility of like, ooh, I work here for 10, 20 years, then it becomes okay that I didn't come here legally. And at least my kids are U.S. citizens and can do more or what have you. And all of that is being stripped away. There has been no kind of amnesty since the 1980s under Ronald Reagan.
Okay, so Obama didn't really do an amnesty?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I think what he attempted to do I mean, Obama was the deporter in chief. He deported a lot of
Well,
people.
yeah, I heard the ones he deported were like the nightmares, and the other ones were the dreamers. They found a lot of the really nasty people and sent them all back home.
I mean, it depends on your definition. I mean, like, all of this is incredibly fraught. All of this is incredibly complex. Absolutely, in any population, there are nightmares. There are violent people. There are gangsters. There are this, that, and the other thing. And yes, I think you're entirely correct. Obama's advertised focus was, we're just going to get rid of all the
Yeah.
criminals. And of course, what is a criminal? That depends on what the system of wherever that person was, and, maybe in Alabama, it's like they got 2 marijuana misdemeanors. So they're a horrible criminal that has to be gotten rid of. Of course, the fact that Obama deported those people constantly and Trump deported those people plus constantly. And then Biden has, any example of that he could find is we're trying to deport. There aren't actually a lot of the actual deportation of anybody who's had any interaction with a criminal system has led to probably the population of migrants in the United States being like incredibly crime free compared to any
Well,
other
yeah, I
U.S.
think the
population.
statistics is basically, I don't know if it was like they're saying if you were an immigrant, but it's basically legal citizens are significantly more likely to commit crimes than illegals.
So this is why immigration is perpetually screwed in the United States. There are a battery of reforms that have been proposed in a variety of reforms. The Bush administration had, that would include, since the 1990s, they've been proposing this, go after the employers, and this, will be. And in a holistic immigration reform that has been proposed and shot down over and over and over again, there is a space for border enforcement. But, it needs to be border enforcement. It needs to be enforcement against the employers. It needs to be sorting out our contradictory and dramatically understaffed approach to refugees and asylum seekers. It needs to dramatic expansion of our visa systems so that people can come here legally. All we've gotten, because there have been pieces of immigration legislation passed, all we've gotten every 5 years or so has been a dramatic expansion of border security. And what that has done has produced a really, really malign influence. The second most damaging influence, immigration policy in the United States, which we are getting a very clear window into in Los Angeles right now, which is the constituency, the lobby that has been built around more border enforcement. It is a boulder running downhill of like these people, at like any government agency are trying to create more jobs for themselves. And that is because of the most malign version, the employers, the people who run the food factories. I mean, it's really appalling. Some of the reports, basically, that we have the classic reforming novel of the late 19th century, was it the early 20th century, is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, which is talking about the horrific practices in meat packing. And, people were like falling into the machines and getting served as meat or whatever. I don't think anything quite that egregious is currently happening in Alabama or Texas, but we wouldn't know.
True.
Because they primarily use undocumented labor that has no ability to
make their voice heard,
to ever become true citizens here. So what we've done is we've actually we've created a really horrific situation for the estimated 10, 12, 15 million, people who are undocumented in the United States. And we've made it perpetual, because anytime somebody sensible says, "Ooh, let's solve this," the employers are saying, "Mm-mm." And what's extraordinary, this tweet actually, I guess it's a Truth Social, came out directly before we started recording this, June 12th. Donald J. Trump, real Donald Trump, says, "Our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good, long-time workers away from them." So Donald Trump is essentially saying, "Oh dear, our donors are angry that we're taking their slaves away, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace." in many cases, the criminals allowed into our country by the very stupid Biden open borders policy are applying for those jobs. This is not good. We must protect our farmers, but get the criminals out of the USA. Changes are coming. This is not the first time we've seen Donald Trump say, gee, yeah, we're trying to do this really egregious, offensive enforcement stuff. But yeah, some of our donors really like having this incredibly vulnerable, defenseless population working for them, so we're going to back off. Hey, Rory, do you like the More Freedom Foundation?
I do.
Would you like us to keep being able to do the More Freedom Foundation?
That's something I think is a wonderful idea. Could you please tell me more?
The way to do that would be to sign up for Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding service, kind of like Kickstarter, except it allows you to send us a certain amount of money every month.
Are there any benefits I get if I sign up to Patreon?
There is a Discord server, which is just for Patreon members. Folks love it over there. We got a lot of really smart folks talking about the news of the day. I find it really useful for my research sometimes. So we've got that Discord server, and we've got not one, but 2 patrons-only events every month. We've got the patrons-only newscast, where patrons suggest stuff that I should look into, and I provide sort of a capsule update for the month. And then we have, on the Discord server, we have a chat with me and the patrons.
So if you have ever wanted to be in my position, asking Rob questions, then there's your chance.
There you go. Yeah. So that is available only to people who sign up on Patreon. I hope you'll join us there.
Do you think it's strange that America has this sort of like, we want incredibly cheap, undocumented workers, but we also hate them and never want them to come in the country because they're all illegal and criminals? Like, it's just a weird way of being like, we hate both ends of this system, but instead of fixing it ever.
Yeah, there's a lot of idiotic hate here. And there's also just a lot of fundamental dishonesty. Like, the whole conversation is nonsense. The idea that we need more militarization of our borders. And, well, actually, the situation is so screwed up. Like, there was a legitimate, throughout the Obama administration, what they were talking about in, folks who were complaining about the border were full of crap. The U.S. economy was very anemic. People just simply weren't coming. Under the Biden administration, we did kind of get back to, in certain years, back to where we were. I mean, if you trust the data, which I don't, but like I think it's fair to say that we were getting back to where we were in the sort of Bush years, in the aughts, where there really were tons and tons of people coming.
So when they keep talking about this open border policy, is that what they're referring to?
Yeah, I think they're just referring to raw numbers. And that was what was so annoying to me about the Google. It's like, why is there a border crisis? It's like, well, because there's so many people coming. It's like, no, there's a border crisis because our legal regime governing this, it is intentionally screwed up. We have basic reforms that go after the employers, that fully staff our asylum and refugee apparatuses. There are changes in laws that should be made that I think would anger a lot of more progressive people. I think that our asylum laws do need to be revised, whether it's international law or not, because what they're doing now is they're creating a situation by being very permissive and saying, oh, you can be here, blah, 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 blah. But you're also going to be vulnerable to our masked secret police nightmare. So like there's clearly like a big mismatch here. And none of these, look, okay, all of this is incredibly complicated. All of this is incredibly difficult. But the basic reforms that need to be made have been apparent to people who work the industries around this for a very long time, and we continue not doing any of it. That is why our immigration system is broken. Our immigration system is broken because a lot of wealthy donors to the Republican and Democratic Party want to continue to have a vulnerable population that they can exploit. That is the main problem with U.S. immigration. The second biggest problem with immigration is a new problem. It is something that we've created in my lifetime, mostly since I finished high school. And that is the lobbies and the unions, and lobbies around the pretty disgusting agencies that enforce the border. They are, we're talking about ICE, we're talking about CBP, talking about a range of other acronyms that is reckoned to amount to about 90,000 people at this point, which makes it one of the largest domestic police forces in the country by far. And it's 90,000 people that all have the same agenda, which is keeping, I have more sympathy for these folks than I do for like the factory owners who want to keep a slave population, but not a ton. I mean,
Well,
these are
because I've
folks
heard quite
who,
often they attract some of the worst people in society that just want to abuse people.
yeah, but I mean, I think that's very
It's
possible,
sort of
but
the people that can't make it in the police are going to places like ICE.
well, I mean, we've crafted a society, Rory, where like it's very hard for people without high degrees of
Hmm.
education to get any kind of
Yeah.
employment. So it's like, yeah, like, and absolutely, you're right. Like there are the worst of the worst. A lot of them show up for a lot of law
Hmm.
enforcement jobs. But I mean, also, and this is kind of interesting that I'm like, I'm recalling from this because of something that I read this morning, which may be part of my racism. But I'm like, Rory, it can't be the worst of the worst because actually these border enforcement populations are majority minority. And as a white liberal guy, I can't possibly describe minority people as the worst of the worst. So yeah, you're seeing my internal conflict here. You know what I mean? But it is kind of interesting looking at some of these photographs of brown people being carried off, and behind the masks, you can see it's actually people of color who are doing the enforcement as well, which is, an interesting dynamic that is
I heard
worth
another
mentioning.
problem is Mexico, in the sense that Mexico is now so wealthy that it's attracting a lot of immigration, and they're like, I was going to go to America, but I speak Spanish and things are kind of okay here. It's better than where I came from. I'm making more money. I remember this an argument Stratford made maybe 10 years ago. I was curious, is that they were basically like, we don't have enough people. We need more people. Is that still an issue?
COVID screwed a lot of this stuff up, and that's, I think, one of the bigger. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest genesis of the border crisis
Mm.
is the Trump sanctions against Venezuela. I think
Oh,
we've
yeah,
talked
yeah,
about
yeah.
this before, but yeah, I mean, like the border crisis is certainly driven by the incoherence and brokenness of U.S. immigration
So if
policy.
America cleaned up its backyard, it wouldn't have this?
Well, if America would stop destroying economies and countries in Central America, and Venezuela and Cuba are the biggest targets, and I believe certainly Venezuelans are the most represented among the people trying to get in the United States right
Hmm.
now, or over the past 4 or 5 years. And I think
But
Cubans.
was that not a dynamic where you have sort of inter-Hispanic racism itself? So you'll have places like Colombians that really hate Venezuelans. So Colombians might be joining ICE because they despise the Venezuelans, so they love kicking them out of America. Is that what we're
I mean,
seeing?
I think maybe. I mean, I'm sure that's
Hmm.
possible. But that's like we're getting sort of to case by case what makes a certain person, and I think there's a lot of folks from. It's a dynamic that Republicans love talking about, but I think is real. That there are folks who got here and benefited from Reagan's amnesty back in the '80s, who are just like, why, like are now competing for jobs, or their kids are competing for jobs with slave population, people with no rights who are obviously going to work for a lot less money. So yeah, I mean, and that's the really vicious thing here is because the people who own the companies and own the factories don't want a real solution. The only solution that is put forward is more border security, more border security. And that's why in 1992, the predecessor of ICE was like 4,000 people. Now it's 20,000 people. I know that Customs and Border Protection has at least doubled in size since 9/11. Like I was tracking down the details on these numbers is a little, hit and miss, but it is metastasizing. And I think what's happening in Los Angeles now is we are seeing this population of people who probably legitimately believe it's, every organization propagandizes its own people, legitimately believe that they're saving the United States from an invasion. These people are now threatening the Republic in very real
Hmm.
ways. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, like, some of the worst of the worst, but they believe this
Well, because I
garbage
was
to
listening to
some
a bit of
degree.
Steve Bannon, and he was just talking about, oh, they've caught this person that's bad and that person that's bad. But yeah, it's just like everything that is wrong in America is down to the illegal immigrants. And you're like, sadly, I wish America was that simple.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? And it's you have to be completely innumerate. Like you have to like not understand numbers at all to believe there's anything to like, okay, so out of a population of 13 million, you've got like one sad story about a drunken driver, or even if you've got literally thousands of sad stories about like, oh, there was this, this migrant did that, and
But
this
sadly,
migrant.
that's all you need, because when you watch the likes of Fox, quite often, right, left-wing media is a bit more statistics and right-wing media is more anecdotes. So yeah, you can easily stretch out 100 anecdotes for weeks.
Exactly. And but like the math is just not there. Like there are criminals in every
Are
population.
you under the impression that, like, remember stuff you said earlier was like, would it be possible to have proper like immigration checks and do it properly rather than whatever ICE is doing? Like, is it deliberately porous to give them something to fight against?
That's an interesting question. Well, like, could they really legitimately shut down the
Yeah,
border?
and just go, look, only whoever he wants coming through.
Well, I'd say, look, because they've been trying to do that for 30 years. So
Hmm.
basically, Bill Clinton in the 1990s invented the U.S. border. After the 1920s, the 1920s immigration reforms were aimed to some degree against the Chinese, who had already been excluded, but mostly against Southern Europeans, mostly against Slavs, Italians, and Jewish folks. That's who it was geared against stopping. The southern border of the United States up until the 1990s was incredibly porous, and it was just sort of understood that, like, yeah, you can go work in Southern California during the growing season and then go home to Mexico. It's fine. In the 1990s, we started actually trying to build the wall, actually trying to knock things down. There's an excellent, funny, I put this in the AI. I was like, did Bill Clinton invent the border? And Google came like pretty like emotionally like, no, he did not. Like, I was like, whoa, okay. Like, but if you actually read what the Google AI tells you, it's like, no, but he like all of the modern policies came from Clinton, the dramatic stepping up. And actually that is a result of the sort of Paul Volcker-inspired collapse of the Mexican economy in the late 80s, early 1990s, sort of Latin American debt crisis is worth of Google. But it was also the pressures of the U.S. destruction of Central America in the 1980s. So there was a legitimate outcry against migration in the 80s and 1990s. And that Radiolab series is phenomenal.
Okay.
This is from, I don't know, a decade past. And it just talks about the way that they actually, I think they talked to like one of the INS guys, or maybe he was Border Patrol. None of these organizations still exist in the way that they used to. 9/11, which we will get to, 9/11 sort of changed everything and made things dramatically worse. One of the federal workers who came up with this plan, which was basically like, we're gonna really militarize the cities first. Because up to the 1990s, I think you could pretty much just like walk from El Paso to what have you. So what they did in the 1990s was they shut down the ability to walk from Tijuana to San
This
Diego.
reminds me of something that happened in Canada, or in the Canadian-American border. There was like a town that was basically straddled both, and people says, yeah, you could just go to one side if a beer was cheaper and go to the other side if cigarettes were cheaper. And now it's like, it's just funny because, as you can imagine, the Canadian side's quite chill, while the American side's like, across the road. It's like, okay, sorry. And
Well, yeah, that's
so
another sad story. That's a 9/11 story. You didn't need a passport to go across the U.S.-Canadian border before 9/11. But in Mexico, that started in the 1990s. I believe in the 1990s, the ability to just, because a lot of these cities on the border have a Mexican side and a U.S. side, that's when the walls went up in the cities. And the guy who sort of helped, formulate this policy, his Operation Guardian or something, realizes that he's probably guilty of killing tens of thousands of people. Because now what you have to do to get in, you need a coyote, and you need to get your water right, and you need to walk through a desert, or this, that, and the other thing. So that's a new thing since the 1990s. And what Trump wants to do is finish the wall that Clinton started in all the cities and just extend it across the whole thing. So this is all very new, and it was accelerated dramatically by Clinton, who sort of, I'd say Clinton can be seen as the father of the sort of border patrol welfare
Is
queens.
this something that the
folks.
Democrats always wanted, or is it one of those things they implement because they're trying to appeal to the Republicans?
I think that you could see that as more like Bill Clinton's triangulation. I don't know that. Well, the people love showing that clip of, I think, Bush and Reagan debating, the first Bush and Reagan debating against each other in the 1980 election or Republican primary, and they're like competing with each other to be like, we're a nation of immigrants.
Being made, one totally uneducated and made to feel that they're living with outside the law. Let's address ourselves to the fundamentals. These are good people, strong people. Part of my family is a Mexican.
Why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back and they can cross and open the border both ways.
It was in the 1990s, in part, you want to get psychological about it. Perhaps, we needed somebody to hate now that we couldn't hate the Russians anymore. So migrants, and because of economic collapses inspired in Central and South America, and well, I guess Mexico's North America, there were a lot of folks, more folks coming than we had recently been aware of.
The Republicans always been trying to sort of appeal to Hispanics, because I remember apparently like Bush Jr. was planning on doing that, and then 9/11 happened, so that distracted him.
Bush Jr. tried to push a large-scale immigration reform in the last years of his second term, I believe. And he, of course, people were a little too focused on the horror show in Iraq that he had created, perhaps understandably. But that's an interesting. I often tell myself that when I finally finish my American Empire book, maybe I'm gonna go and figure out the U.S. border, finally figure out what's really going on there, because I don't feel like I know enough to say definitively what's happening here. I know very clearly that the main problem is employers that we refuse to go after, and the second biggest problem is the border security lobby. But there's a really fundamental dishonesty about everything we hear about the immigration debate. The fact that we don't talk about employers front and center. It seems like
some of the most powerful entities in America.
Yeah, it seems like the clashes in Los Angeles started at least 2 separate Home Depot parking lots, where ICE and CBP started going after. I don't know if they were going after Home Depot employees.
That's what I heard.
Or were they going after, or is that just a standard place to pick up migrant
workers? Well, yeah,
workers?
basically that. It's just places they know there will be a good chance of migrants, and then anyone that's a bit brown.
And it's an absurdity that we're going after these very weak people.
Oh yeah.
Rather than the people who are employing them.
But also, if I work at Home Depot, the chances are I'm not a criminal, because if I was, I might be doing my criminal job full time.
Yeah, that too. So yeah, the whole conversation is really dishonest.
I just wanted to point out, because they keep using this. I'm not totally au fait with American illegal entities. But they're pointing out that this is sort of slightly less illegal than speeding. It's kind of being an illegal immigrant's like a misdemeanor, is it?
It depends on how it's treated. I haven't.
But it's basically small fry, but it's being treated like you're Osama bin Laden's brother.
Well, that was sort of the third point. But the second point I want to get to about the fundamental dishonesty here is the Customs and Border Protection, or is it Border Patrol numbers, are what we use to determine everything. If the past 12 years have taught us anything, it is that the Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection under it and the Border Patrol under it are fundamentally in the tank for Donald Trump and an insane version of border security where we don't actually fix any of our laws, but we just continue funneling billions and billions of dollars.
Palantir
is a different issue, but I've just so the same people who are clearly partisan actors working really hard to jack up their budgets, their staffing, this, that, and the other thing, clearly on Donald Trump's side. We believe their numbers for border interdictions, and I'm not even saying they're lying about the number of border interdictions. They can just do less work and make Donald Trump look better.
Okay.
And saying the numbers are down. So that's
true.
Our whole picture of what's going on at the border is,
so they're marking their own homework, basically.
Exactly. Is completely, because the behavior of the people under the Department of Homeland Security, CBP, ICE, Border Patrol, in the first Trump administration back in 2020, and certainly right now, is completely indefensible, completely like they have abolish ICE, yes, like slice it up, throw it away, like absolutely fire all of them. And these are the people whose information we are using to determine everything about our immigration discussion, and I think that's nuts. But and to your point, sort of the third point I wanted to say, like Trump, this great myth that Trump or the Republicans are going after illegals or criminals, and in their definition, everybody's a criminal, but they're not making distinctions between the misdemeanor of actually being illegal here and like going out and killing people. But if in their press conferences they will use the anecdote of that one terrible migrant who killed a family, and then list the hundreds of people that they're dinging for this misdemeanor and saying that that's worthy of deportation. One of the worst things that's been happening recently is people are showing up for their immigration appointments.
I've heard this,
Showing up, obviously people who are trying to legally live here are like in communication.
Doing their very best, doing what they're told.
With the relevant bureaucracies, show up to hand in their paperwork and get detained and thrown on a plane. It is insane. It is insane. And so like, I think maybe a good place to close is with abolish ICE.
Melt ICE.
What's
Melt
that?
ICE.
Melt ICE, yes. Abolish ICE, yes. Like we absolutely need ICE to be abolished. That does not mean...
no border patrol or, checking immigration.
That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have, a border enforcement. That doesn't, so I think ICE itself has a couple different wings. There is actually a part of ICE that has folks that actually investigate, terrorism or criminal gangs or whatnot. And then there's another part of ICE that just loves to go to Home Depot and arrest brown people. So I don't know, maybe there's salvageable bits of ICE or what have you. But the important question is, I think actually there's a lot of personnel that need to be fired. Probably most of the elements of our current immigration enforcement architecture should continue to exist to some degree. But what needs to be reversed is a horrifically bad decision that was taken about 25 years ago. And this is in the aftermath of 9/11. All of these bureaucracies were moved out from under better departments that they used to work under and were consolidated under the Department of Homeland Security. So there are a lot of places where you could put immigration enforcement. I looked at the history of Immigration Naturalization Service. It's interesting. Before 9/11, our main immigration enforcement and regulation agency was a service. After 9/11, it's enforcement. It's in its origin, it was with the Department of Labor. So in a sane...
it makes total sense, though. Because you want them to work?
Well, no, but in a sane... So Department of Labor does a number of things, but it collects labor statistics. So in a sane immigration system, like the experts at the Department of Labor would say, looking at the U.S. economy right now, we need, X tens of thousands of
unskilled labor,
new citizens to work in the poultry factories. We need X thousands of new citizens to go do engineering stuff. And that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Something that also makes a lot of sense to me, I think in perhaps I don't know when it moved to the Department of Justice. And that is where I still believe all of this belongs, under the Department of Justice, which is like, let's follow laws.
Yeah.
So before 9/11, it was under the Let's Follow Laws Department, the Department of Justice. I actually kind of think it'd be interesting, maybe, because there's a lot of disputes over IRS, and IRS information, because I think a lot of undocumented, I haven't looked into the minutiae of this, but I believe a lot of undocumented folks actually do pay taxes to the IRS and have relationships with them and what have you. Maybe the IRS is a good place for this, but my choice would be the DOJ. So, the IRS is about collecting taxes and revenue. Like, the Department of Labor is about labor, and let's make sure the workforce is properly balanced and protected in the United States. That's a good place. The Department of Justice is, let's follow laws. Let's have a country of the rule of law. That is a really good place for this. The Department of Homeland Security is the racist paranoia department.
Because occasionally, like Ukraine has found out, occasionally the paranoid racist party is necessary in a crisis, but the vast majority of time you don't need them.
Exactly. So it is basically in an incredible misstep that I believe is actually, in someone reading this morning had implied more than I had expected. It was kind of a bipartisan, stupid thing that was done, which was a bunch of security forces of the federal government that were under a variety of more appropriate places were consolidated under the racist paranoia party. It is the 9/11. If the United States was traumatized by 9/11 in ways that were bad for U.S. development going forward, its personification is the Department of Homeland Security. This morning, I went to the Customs and Border Protection website, and it reads like 2005. Like, it's like, we are Customs and Border Protection. We are keeping the United States safe from terrorism. Like, it was just like, it's like, no, man, like, you're here to collect tariffs and like make sure that people are entering legally. Like, it was deeply, deeply, and like a lot of this and how bad our border is, it's all war on terror stuff. Spencer Ackerman has written a book about how the war on terror is boomeranging back into the United States. He's got some great coverage of this recently. And this is just that's what this is, like, to
Well,
a
because
T.
everyone's a
Like,
terrorist now. Because we have, is it cartels or terrorists, and then basically everyone's now a cartel if they don't look right.
yeah, and that's I mean that's what's happening here. And just one, like, the fundamental ridiculousness of how Trump was able to create the chaos in Los Angeles that he wants. It's like, we live in, and this comes to Palantir. But again, I don't believe it should be Palantir or the Department of Homeland Security that runs this, literally the Department of Racist Paranoia. It should be the Department of Justice or the IRS, agencies that are interested in their DNA in collecting revenue, in following the laws, like that. Those are the kinds of agencies that should, yes, I believe, have some sense of who is in the country with some kind of overarching database. And you don't need to give some Silicon Valley assholes to do it. You can hire some engineers at the Department of Justice and the IRS to make this happen, who are actually controlled by Congress and the federal government, instead of a bunch of Silicon Valley,
And they might invent a new tool that's useful to fix this problem instead of going, oh, here's something I've been trying to sell for 20 years. Please buy it.
Yeah, exactly. But it is ridiculous in 2025 to assert, this is like the fundamental dishonesty, that it is somehow necessary for a bunch of jackbooted thugs with hidden faces.
Oh, yeah, that's terrifying. When the badge numbers are covered up.
Yeah, that need to be throwing people in vans. That is nonsense. If we actually had a functioning immigration system that was not obviously a paranoid racist delusion in its enforcement, then yeah, local law enforcement could say, gee whiz, like, these people aren't here legally, and maybe they would like go in and do something, and they'd be local law enforcement that would be, or that city or state could decide, actually, we're not interested in that. And that's like fundamentally what's really happening in Los Angeles about, like, there's nothing that ICE with these raids is doing to improve anything.
No.
I mean, Donald Trump's already saying, we're going to stop doing so much of this because we want.
But how much of this do you think is affecting the, U.S. economy when you consider you do have a backbone? Like, if you were to fix this and have these people documented, you could do it slowly and give them rights. But this is happening very suddenly. Are we not going to see like a massive drop in U.S. productivity, in farming and textiles and mystery meat factories?
So the problem, Marie, is we're not going to know what's actually happening. We don't know what's actually happening. We know that probably he's not enforcing any of this stuff in Republican areas. We've seen this before. In 2020, there was some, I forgot the name of the organization exactly, but there was some great organizations that did some FOIA requests on one of the policies that they were trying to implement, a big crackdown in 2020. It was called Operation Palladium. You should Google the FOIA on this. It's fascinating stuff. And basically, they were kind of going after Houston, but they were almost exclusively going after big blue cities.
So like a weird opposite version of pork barreling.
Well, no, it's it's purely political targeting.
Instead of giving the places that vote for you the treats, you're just not giving them the punishment.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah, and that's exactly what's happening in Los Angeles right now, is that Trump sees political benefit in going into and crushing California. That's what he wants to do here. And the timing here is fascinating. So on June 6th, the federal government launched an escalation of raids in Los Angeles. This prompted some sporadic protesting here and there. To be clear, Los Angeles is not on fire. Los Angeles is not burning down.
Editing Rory here. In a similar note, I was in Ballymena today and everything went well. Ballymena is still standing. And if you consider a small town sort of can function without being that noticed, then definitely a massive city like LA will as well.
There is a downtown area with a bunch of court and administrative areas that was briefly disrupted. The LAPD can totally handle this. The LAPD is
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Is it like 80,000? Like they have a massive amount.
The LAPD, absolutely. So on Wednesday, the chief of the LAPD says, we don't need the National Guard, this is yesterday. It is completely unnecessary. So on June 6th, sporadic protesting starts. On June 7th, there's a little bit more protesting that the LAPD is more than capable of handling. But by the evening of June 7th, Trump is saying it's a huge crisis.
Yes.
He's calling out the National Guard against the will of the governor of California. And he's saying we have to send in the Marines.
But this is the party of states' rights.
Yeah. So this is very clearly a ginned up catastrophe, very much intentional by Donald Trump, very much for his political benefit. And who's to say whether it be effective or not? Who's to say? It's entirely possible that he could inspire the kinds of violent clashes between federal troops and local populations in California that he wants. The bloodier, the better for Trump. Who knows where this is going to go? But I think the most fundamental message I have to provide is that this is all based on lies. This is all really fundamentally dishonest as to who's to blame here, why our system is broken, why it continues to remain being broken. It's the brokenness that allows these really out of control military forces to be used in this way that is truly endangering the Constitution in ways that we don't often see in the United States.
How can you see California coping with this? Because it is like, the most powerful state in America.
I mean, so it's interesting because there can be full-on clashes, armed military clashes between these racist DHS organizations and local people in Los Angeles, and nobody in Los Angeles noticing. It's a very dispersed...
Oh, yeah, because it's such a giant, sprawling city.
Yeah, it is a very dispersed place. So, I mean, who's to say? I mean, Newsom spent a lot of time temporizing. Then apparently, so this is California Governor Newsom. So, yeah, it's very hard for me to predict how this will all
pan out,
how this will all shake out. But I thought it was important to give a little bit of a background.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully, there's good news on this topic in the future when you listen to it. Catch you next time.
Here's hoping.
The More Freedom Foundation is also available on YouTube and TikTok. Rob's Twitter is RobOLaw, and he's also written a book called Avoiding the British Empire, What It Was and How the US Can Do Better. And music provided by Kevin MacLeod.